I'm afraid that I may have killed off all of the fish in the pond. 3.5 acres worth of fish, thousands of fish. We've got a big problem here that we need to try to address. Almost the whole pond is covered in duckweed. So usually our pond has a algae problem, filamentous algae. And this year we ended up having duckweed, and it just got worse and worse the whole time. And it is almost, if we kind of step back here and look down that way, it's completely covering that end. So I've done some reading this week on duckweed, and they say on older ponds like this was from 1984, so this pond is getting close to 40 years old. The nutrient levels can be very high. Lots of nutrients in there due to all of the debris and muck and everything that's in the bottom. And that duckweed can thrive really good with all those nutrients and replicate really quickly and just take the pond over. So we bought an aerator to put in the pond, and today we're actually going to finally do the permanent install. We're going to start the permanent install today. We're going to try to get the aerators out there. That's going to help create some beneficial bacteria, and that will eat away at all of the muck in the pond. It'll help take the nutrients out of the pond and get them down to a more proper level. So by no means do I think the aerator is going to fix this problem. No, I think it's going to make the pond healthier, and I think next year, if we can get this working well, next year we'll have less of a chance of this happening. But I don't think it's really going to take away the duckweed, at least this year. I think it's going to take a long time for the pond and the water in the pond to get healthy, but we need to go ahead and do something so that this stops happening. So this aerator is from EasyPro, and this isn't sponsored or anything. We paid for this out of our own pocket. And each one of these is a double diffuser. It has this rubber membrane, and it's got like thousands of little holes in here just to make little bubbles in the pond to help get oxygen in the water. So the diffusers are mounted to a steel plate, and this is made to sink it in the pond, hold it at the bottom. So this is the aerator pump that came with our system. It's got 4 connections on it so that you can have 4 different diffusers. And this thing is louder than you think it is, so I decided to buy a cabinet to put it in. And I bought the cabinet that had soundproofing. It's not completely coated, but there's foam on the top, and then there's foam on 3 of the sides in here, so hopefully this is a lot quieter. All right, I got the aerator pump all mounted in the enclosure. So now we just need to see where we can get this mounted. So I think I'm going to mount the aerator cabinet at least a couple feet higher than the water level, and I'm thinking somewhere in here, but it's all covered in brush and blackberries. So I'm going to grab the tractor and we're going to just mow all this down. We're going to clear an area and then level off a spot in here for that cabinet. So I'm just going to level me off a spot somewhere in here. Put this cabinet. And we'll see if they're level to each other. And they are. All right, we're good. So instead of setting this cabinet right on those concrete blocks where all the paint will probably get scratched up and it'll start to rust, I've decided to just put some treated lumber and bolt that to the bottom with some lag screws, and then we'll set that on top of the concrete. It'll give it, I guess, something a little softer to sit on, some sacrificial layer to be in between. Something like that. So hopefully this doesn't vibrate off of here. If it starts doing that, I can put landscape adhesive or some kind of silicone in between there and glue everything to the blocks. So, yep, nice and level. So now that we've got the aerator cabinet in place, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start putting the diffusers. We're going to start sinking those down in the pond. We're going to sink them in several locations to aerate the pond. Now the power to this cabinet, for right now, it's going to be temporary power. We're just going to run an extension cord out to here because we actually have to trench wire in. From this cabinet, we got to trench wire in all the way back to the mechanical room in the basement of our house. That's going to be a little over 200 feet of wire that'll have to be trenched in. So we're going to do that at a later date, but we'll have it up and running today just using an extension cord. But let's go ahead and start working on the diffusers. So here's our double air diffuser. Of course, the hose is attached to the barb on here, but it's also clamped to the metal frame as well. And that's actually on there pretty good where you can pull it up this way, but I really do not want to lift these out of the water using the hose. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie a rope onto here as well. And then I ended up buying some floating duck decoys. And these are 100% foam filled, so they shouldn't sink over time. They should last out there. The paint may fade on them, but they should last. So we're gonna tie the rope onto the diffuser, have these floating in the water above. If we ever need to pull them up, we just find the duck, pull up the diffuser with the rope. So that's the plan on how we can maintain these or pull them out later. Okay. All right, there we go. We got the first diffuser in. We're heading back for number 2. So this run right here is going to be 200 feet of this weighted tubing. So instead of trying to pull it from the shore, which actually didn't work very well, we're going to coil it up here in the boat and just drop it in as we row out there. It'll be a lot easier. All right, we're tied off. Doing great. All right, the last air diffuser's done. The duckweed is so thick, we're pushing it with the boat. It's crazy. So our pond is 3.5 acres, and the aerator kit that we bought was for up to 4 acres. So it had a total of 4 of the double diffusers, 600 feet of the weighted air line, and we've got all 4 of these air diffusers in. And I think a couple hundred extra feet of air line would have been handy. We could have gone a lot farther down that direction because our pond's kind of long, but everything's hooked up now and I'm ready to try it out. There we go. This is supposed to quiet this down. Yeah, somewhat quieter. All right, I see one on right there. See how long it takes to get to the other ones. I don't know what the deal is with that one over there, but it doesn't want to flow with all 4 on. Now, if you turn one off, that one will start to flow, but it's just a trickle, just a little bit. And the one at the other far end, that's the other long run, it'll be sitting there like rolling, like a rolling boil. So I know that length should work. 200 feet length over there works fine. For some reason, that one isn't working now. Well, my camera batteries are going dead, so I just went out there and I messed with it. I pulled it out of the pond probably 4 times, dropped it back down. Air was flowing fine. When it got to the bottom, it just stopped. And I thought, well, maybe it's upside down, maybe something. So I just kept on dropping it. And I think it has to do with the depth. See, that is right in front of the dam. That is the deepest part of the pond. And I think it needs more pressure to get under there. So it looks like at that depth, I'm not going to be able to run all 4 of them. So I ended up shutting one off over here so that one could run, because the deepest one is actually going to do the most good. It's in the air is in the water longer as it rises, puts more oxygen into the water. So right now we're just going to run 3. I may eventually have to pull that one up and move it this direction where it's a little bit shallower, and it'll probably run all 4 fine. But I think it just has to do with how deep that one actually is. Now this aeration system, I'm not actually supposed to leave it on. The first time you kick it on, you're supposed to kick it on for like 15 minutes and then turn it off the next day 30 minutes, and the next day an hour. You just double it every day if you read the directions. That's what they say to do. And the reason for that is because an older pond like this is almost a 40-year-old pond. There's so much debris and muck and everything down at the bottom. Those air diffusers are pushing that up into the water, and it's getting in the water, and all that stuff can be toxic to the fish. And you could actually possibly kill some fish by just kicking it on and leaving it on. So you gotta slowly build that up. So I'll probably do that. We'll be kicking it on and off, and it'll take us about a week and a half before we finally get it to where it's running 24 hours. But I think for today, I think I am done for today. Hot day, 102 degrees out there in the sun. It was just miserable. Well, it's been 3 days now since we put the aeration system in the pond. And the pond looks better today, actually, and that's because we got a bunch of rain. It has nothing to do with the aerator. In fact, everything to do with the aerator has gone very badly. Hasn't gone well at all. In fact, I'm afraid that I may have killed off all of the fish in the pond. 3.5 acres worth of fish. Thousands of fish. So let me go ahead and tell you all of the little problems we've had since we put in the aerator. So this aerator pump runs very hot. In fact, it actually has a warning on it that says, hot surfaces, risk of burns, do not touch. And that is true. It gets so hot that it will burn you if you touch it. And the problem I had was these hoses hooked to the barbs, and this whole manifold gets hot because the pump is hot. So this weighted air tubing, you can see it's fairly thick and it's very rubbery. So when this goes onto that manifold, it heats up and this starts to swell. It gets bigger. It starts to kind of blow up a little bit under the air pressure, and then finally it blows out. So right behind the hose clamp, you can see where it's ripped right there. It's blown out. And then once this blows out, all the air comes out of there. None of it goes in the diffusers. So the aeration system basically completely stops working. So I cut it off. I put it back on. It was really loose because the tubing was stretched. I put it back on, and it was shortly later it blew out again. So I ended up turning the aerator off. And it probably did. I've messed with it for a while, troubleshooting the one that's out there that's deeper. So it may have ran an hour or two the first day. Next day I ended up going to Menards. I ended up finding some 3/8 inner diameter tubing that was fuel line. And fuel line was rated for 175 degrees. It was rated for some hotter temperature. It's reinforced so that it won't stretch. And I used that to make some repairs in the cabinet. So I ended up taking about 1 foot of fuel line. I attached it directly to the manifold, which is hot. And then I used a barb and I connected it to the, to the weighted hose. And that seemed to work. So I decided to go ahead and let that run for a little bit and test it out, see how well the fuel line worked. I went ahead and I did my drone shots that day. I went over the pond with the drone, seeing the aerators working. And when I was done, I didn't turn it off. I ended up leaving it running, which was a mistake. So the next day I came home from work. I went to work the next day. I came back. It's been 48 hours since we installed it, and it wasn't working again. I had another hose blowout. I only fixed one. So I came out here. I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and replace the rest of the hoses with the fuel line for the first foot. So I come out here. I start making my repairs, and I notice that I've got dead fish along the bank of the pond. And I'm like, oh no, this is not good. So as I start to look around, there is hundreds, maybe probably thousands of dead fish. And most of them are out here in this big part of the pond. And they're all along the bank, everywhere. And mostly bluegill is what I see. I see a few bass, mostly the smaller minnows and the bluegill. So I was like, oh my goodness, I think I've killed off all my fish. So I went down to the narrow end of the pond, the far end where we're not aerating. I went down there, I only found about 5 dead fish down there. And I thought, oh, please don't let me kill off all these fish. Hopefully there's some fish that are alive down there. So today is the 3rd day, right? I came home from work today and there is a lot more fish that are dead. And keep in mind, it's been off for the last 24 hours. So then now I see lots of big fish out there. I went out there, I found some catfish. The biggest catfish I found was close to 3 feet long. And I found some bass out there. There's some bigger fish out there. Tons of course, bluegill and smaller fish. And now I haven't rode down there, but now I can see there is dead fish down the far end of the pond. So I am afraid that there's a really good chance that by leaving this aeration system running, I've killed off all the fish in the pond. So that would kick up all the toxic muck and stuff in the water, dirty the water, probably make it hard for the fish to breathe. And I said that I was supposed to kick it on 15 minutes at, the first day, 30 minutes the next day, and double it every day. Well, obviously I didn't stick to that. I left it running. I was complacent because I had ran this in the wintertime. I actually had this sitting out here in the shallow part right here in the wintertime, ran all winter long to keep the ice from forming for the ducks so they had somewhere to swim. So I wasn't as worried about it, probably because I had already had it in the pond running. But this time we put it in deeper water where there's probably more muck, more silt, more debris, and it definitely was bad. I mean, it definitely killed a lot of fish. And I just sick to your stomach. I mean, you feel awful about the whole thing. And today I come out here hoping that it doesn't look any different, and it looks worse today. 36 hours after we originally turned it on the first time. And really, it's probably only ran a 24-hour period. And that's a guess, because it wasn't working when I came home. So I'm not sure exactly how long it ended up running. But it is amazing, 24 hours or less of running, and it has probably killed all the fish in my pond. And I really don't know what to say. This was a total opposite of what I wanted to do. I really wanted to try to get this. This is an old pond. I wanted to get it healthy. I wanted to get it where it was a very healthy environment for fish to thrive and for us to come out here and fish and to catch food. And then I ended up doing the total opposite. It's just, I ended up killing everything instead. It's just, my intentions were good, but I screwed it up. So if you guys ever put in one of these aeration systems, stick to the timeline. 15 minutes the first day, 30 minutes the next day, an hour, then 2 hours. Double it every day until you finally get to 24-hour day period. And man, I really did not think this was going to happen, or else I wouldn't have left it on. I was just too confident in it, I guess, since I had already ran it over the wintertime. Oh my God. Yeah, this is terrible. I really don't know what to say. So it looks like this fall I'm going to be restocking the pond. So it is amazing how many fish you have to put in one of these things, especially when you're starting out. It is hundreds per acre. This is 3.5 acres, and I think it's somewhere between 300 to 500 bluegill to put per acre on a new pond. So probably this fall, I won't be surprised if we put in somewhere close to 1,000 to 1,500 bluegill in this pond. And they are the bait fish. They're what everything else eats, pretty much. And the next spring, we may go ahead and put a few bass in here. I'm gonna wait and see. I haven't seen a ton of dead bass. I think there's some bass in here that have survived. But next spring, we'll probably, once the bluegill get a little bit bigger, we'll probably go ahead and put some catfish in here and some bass. And we'll just have to wait and see how it all goes. But We'll slowly stock this back up. But the impact of this is huge. Like, this is probably going to take, to get to where this pond was today, I probably set it back 5 years. 5 years to get the catfish as big and the bass as big as it was right now. And so we've done this already once. When we got here, this was only bass, nothing else. Everything had been killed off before, and only bass survived. And that's probably what's happening again. And we stocked it with bluegill, red ear, catfish, and that was back in like 2016. So it's going to take it's going to take a lot of years to finally get this back to where it is. And hopefully there is some fish left in here. One of the other things we can do is we can go to some of our friends' house and we can fish up some bigger fish, some bigger bluegill, some bigger bass, and we can put them in here so that they can start breeding and populating. And that we actually did that too back in like 2016. We went and caught like 30 mature bluegill at one of the guys I work with's house, and we put them in this pond to help populate it. So there's several things we probably will do over the next year or so. We are going to put some carp in here, grass carp, to help eat some of the vegetation. There's no way they would be able to eat all of that duckweed, but we will put some grass carp in here as well to help keep some of that back. But basically, I think we have done the big reset on the pond unintentionally, and we're gonna have to start all over. So we'll just have to wait and see how this all turns out, but it doesn't look good. And it's just, I feel awful. I mean, I didn't want this to happen, believe me. You feel awful that you killed all of those fish, and that's not what I wanted to do. So it is what it is. There's nothing I can do to change it now, but we will do what we can to turn this back into a healthy pond and a productive pond. But I think it's going to take several years. We've been set back from this incident, so it's going to take several years to make that happen. So, but anyway, I think that's going to be it for today's video. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.